Welcome to another conversation with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patty, and I make this podcast with my sister Nancy. We grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We're also nerdy about history and culture, but we're critical of religion. So get ready to get mad or to nod your head in agreement as we embark on today's topic. Today, we'll be talking about our time as evangelicals. Nancy and I work really hard to bring you quality content. So if you like what you see here, let's make the algorithm happy. Subscribe to our channel, like this show, and leave a comment down below. You can support the show either through YouTube channel memberships or through Patreon and become one of our sinful siblings. Let's get started. Okay, Nancy, we're going to finally do it. We have teased here and there, talked a little bit about our evangelical experience, but primarily we've kind of focused on the cult. And so today is the day we're going to change that and dive all the way into our various experiences with evangelicalism.
Which is not really that different from a cult. I've heard it said best, cults are just small, unpopular churches, and churches are just large, popular cults. Something along those lines. That makes sense to me.
When you and I have talked about our cult experience in the Worldwide Church of God, and
Hmm.
then we kind of like reference the evangelicalism and how it was similar or different, we we've kind of said two things about it. We've said, okay, on one hand, it's like softer, more fluffy, coated in sugar syrup of Jesus loves you. But then on the
Yep.
other side, it's actually a little more toxic because they're still like having just as much control over your lives and everything. But in the cult, they told you that. They're like, you need to do it this way because this is God's way. But in evangelical churches that we were a part of, it's more like the cultural norms are kind of like enforced in really passive aggressive bullshit ways.
Well, and the way I've always understood it is fundamentalism. That's really just evangelicalism. In fact, I think that's a term that Christians gave it. Fundamentalism sounds like very legalistic and had all these negative connotations with it, but then they stuck this word evangelicalism in here. You know, the pretty happy Jesus rainbows out your asshole people.
Well, at the
Ta-da!
same time, though, I think you're not wrong, but I think they did mean specifically the evangelical meant we send missionaries out into the field like the next phase of colonialism, except they didn't say that last part.
Well, and Armstrong in the Worldwide Church of God, he had he had evangelists. They didn't really go about proselytizing, but it was more like the best marketing out there is free marketing, free advertising, word of mouth. That seems to work every time. And that's exactly what Armstrong did in Worldwide. Um, he wanted to make it seem like this elite club, very elect. You were selected to be amongst God's chosen people, or it's like they already were, but they found the truth because someone brought it to them. So they don't go around like missionary work like evangelists do. But I think they went around baptizing people, is what they did, the evangelists.
You mean Herbert W. Armstrong's top dudes, like his cabinet or whatever, his
Right,
evangelists. Okay,
right.
because you're right. I was like, the Worldwide Church of God didn't do evangelism in the way we think of it. So, I mean, given the fact that the Worldwide Church of God didn't do this whole like missions and send people to preach the gospel, they didn't tell us to talk to our friends at school about Jesus or anything like that. That was a whole new thing that we both encountered when
Hmm.
we both independently got ourselves involved in evangelicalism. So, I mean, maybe just to introduce each of our journeys here, um, for me, I spent about 10 years in evangelicalism,
Whew,
and
I didn't know it
that
was that
I
long, Pat. Holy shit, 10 years?
I mean, there was
Uh,
definitely points in there where I wavered or didn't go as much, but by and large, it was the full 10 years. And I was dedicated, like we'd come out a couple years earlier out of our cult. And so I had these vague religious ideas in my head, but without anyone telling me do's and don'ts, I didn't know what was what. So I got pulled into to a church that was near our hometown. And of course, it was because of a boy, because I liked a guy I worked with at the gas station, and he went there. So I went, and it like was an instant, like everyone around me, and I had friends, and it sucked me in. And I went through probably 4 or 5 different locations that I was a part of evangelicalism, which I'll get into. But yeah, it took 10 years in like non-denominational stuff, Assemblies of God, and then a couple of different college ministries, and then back into an Assemblies of God charismatic church before I finally was like, okay, I think I'm done with this. So what was your like what was the path you took in evangelicalism, Nancy, and how long?
I mean, similar but different. I did also get sucked in because of somebody. It wasn't like I looked at an evangelical church. I'm like, oh yeah, I am about that. I'm very intrigued and I love the Bible. It's so interesting. I love this fucking music that they play all the time and hands going up like this. Oh, I love you, Jesus. Oh God, it couldn't have been more cringy to me. So I know it wasn't me that sought after it. And I pinpointed it down to maybe mid 2000s when an old friend of mine from college, like the first college I had started attending, reached out to me. She wasn't even really a friend, a close friend, more like an acquaintance, someone I knew. And I had her on Facebook, randomly reached out to me. And I want to say during this time period, MLMs were pretty saturated into the culture. They were pretty big, but I really wasn't aware of them. And it turns out she was in an MLM, and this was her whole ploy was to reach out to people and show them the plan of how you become an IBO, which is independent business owner. I won't get into too many details yet, but it started there. And then she, of course, got me into going to this mega church with her that was televised, that had insane amounts of money, um, very political. Of course, you know which side of the spectrum on the political line they were all on. And I was in the military at the time. And so all of a sudden, she brings me to the church. I didn't really want to go, but all of a sudden, I had a ton of friends just love bombing me, surrounding me, telling me how proud they are of me being in the military. And I was about to deploy at the time. And all of a sudden, this very floaty time period of my life, all of a sudden, I had like support and admiration and validation. And so for a time, I got sucked into that world, but it was like I could see it for the bullshit it was. But I just kind of kept going, not because I feared any God or anything, or definitely not because I enjoyed it, but because of I didn't want to lose that support, even though it felt incredibly fake. At the time, it was all I had.
How long did that last? How many years were you a part of
No,
that?
I would say no more than maybe 4 years or so, maybe.
Okay. Okay.
Do you remember? I mean, you had gotten away from like evangelical spaces before I think I ever entered it, right? But you hadn't gotten to the point where you were like, um, trying to tell me, like, no, this is bullshit, get away from it. Because at one point you did kind of have an intervention with me and explain it. At the time, I was just like, even though I didn't believe in it, I was still kind of advocating for it, saying, why would you not want to come to church with me? This is like God shit, praising God and stuff.
I know. Well, at
It
that
was
point,
so weird. I
but at that point, you'd been used to me being an evangelical for 10 years. And so you
yeah,
probably thought I like still would have carried that. And that's what you hear in church, right? Is like, oh, they know the truth. We just need to help them come back to their faith. Like,
it was such a cringy time
no.
for both of us. I don't think by the time I was in evangelicalism that I even knew you had faded away from it. I just didn't want anything to do with it when you were in it, and you were always trying to get me to go to church and singing about Jesus and I just I lived in so many different places, had so many different chapters of my life I was working on. I even lived with you a couple of times. But you were busy doing your religious shit, and I always thought, well, no, she's a good Christian girl, and I've always been what I've been, whatever the fuck that is, just kind of drinking, partying, doing life my own way. And then I get sucked into it.
I mean, I know we're gonna get into like the nitty gritty details of like all of our time in it, but like that coming out stuff, like Nancy, uh, I came out of belief as I was like getting ready to have kids. It just made everything
Mm-hmm.
come clear. Like when I needed to see the world as my children would see it, boom, Christianity
Mm-hmm.
disappeared from my belief system. Yeah.
Okay, I did want to just clarify the timeline though too, Pat. So I know we've talked about evangelicalism, our experiences in various little bits, right? But I don't think we've ever gone into detail as far as the timeline. Now, our parents had gotten away from the Worldwide Church of God, a very legalistic, fundamentalist, doomsday cult.
Mm-hmm.
By what year was it? I think it was
Mm,
around
96,
2000.
97. No. Well, we
Well, when they
left.
moved away.
Oh, when they moved away. Yeah, they moved from Wisconsin down to South Carolina. Yeah, so they moved they when the church fell away from them, they went
Mhm.
chasing after the old cult ideas, and so they moved out of state. It was late 98, 99. It was 1999.
Okay, because I was about to graduate high school and I
Yeah.
graduated in the year 2000. Um, so yeah, we'll gloss over this a little bit, but our parents did follow another radio voice, a man named Ralph Stair of Overcomer Ministries, called himself Brother Stair. We will talk about him at some point because that's a whole nother story. We never
He
had to deal
was
with him
he was
personally,
God's end
but
time prophet, though. You can't forget that. He was God's end time prophet.
then what the fuck was Herbert W. Armstrong, Patty? They can't both be God's end time prophet.
But they're
Neither can
both dead
either of these
now.
thousands of men that claim they are. I know. Thank fuck for that. God, gross dudes. Both of them somehow got to pull on our parents. But that's their story. You and I went off on our own. You were in
Mhm.
college.
Yeah, okay. So if our parents moved away in 99, nope, it happened before that. It I was a senior in high school,
Hmm.
probably the big change of the church falling away. Dad's like walking around with headphones on all the time, indoctrinating himself into
Hmm.
Brother Stare dude that you mentioned. And so I'm like about to turn 18 and here I need to like figure out fucking life. I've got my college lined up, but other than that, I don't know anything about life, right?
By the way, I
Yeah.
just wanted to point out, I don't want to get you off track here, but I find it really weird that it was okay for dad to be in headphones all the time listening to his indoctrination shit when he hated the fact that I had headphones listening to music. He said, "Oh, you just another excuse to tune out the family." You know what kind of shit I listened to in high school? Hanson, for fuck's sakes.
Bop.
Bop, dop, dop, doo, wop, do you, I do, wop.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's easy to see the double standard there for what he thought was approved material to be consuming away from the family and what wasn't. But
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. You described it in exactly that way, Pats, that he was just self-indoctrinating so much because he was listening to him on the radio constantly. And like as I got closer to graduation in high school, that's all I remember about Dad was just him sitting listening to the radio. He would go to church somewhere up north on his own. Mom was not even going to. In fact, she didn't even believe in that for a long time. And then eventually, he just decides that he's going to up and move the whole family when I'm a few months away from graduating high school to clear across the country from Wisconsin to California. This is long after we moved to Wisconsin from California as children. But eventually, I don't know if she actually believed it, if he had convinced her or not, but she went along with it eventually. I don't know if she just didn't want to split the family apart for disobeying him or what the situation was, but That's how it happened. That's how our family split apart. You and I went off on our own. And the rest of the family, the other four members, went to South Carolina to join Brother Stairs commune in Walterboro, South Carolina.
Just the important thing about that in the timeline is recognizing that that's the first time also that I'm not there at home because I'm off at
Right.
college. And so there you are seeing everything happening without me doing my life in the mix of it all too.
Hmm. But then you didn't get into evangelicalism when you were still living at home with mom and dad, right? It was after?
So,
Or,
that's okay, right. That's where we left on the timeline. So it's a little bit blended over. So it was that I was a senior in high school. We weren't doing the cult stuff anymore.
hmm.
And then I started working when I turned 18, December of my senior year. I started working at the gas station because I had to be 18 to work there because I had to have my liquor license.
Remember that?
So I technically I had one semester of high school still at home while I was just starting to get myself into evangelicalism.
Hmm.
Because the thing that made me be like, "Oh, yes, I want to go," is because of course the boy was cute and I wanted to go wherever he was going because yay. Um, but
Penis.
then but then but I wasn't doing that. But then when I went with him to his church, it turned out it was in the same building that our cult, like the one of the last places our cult had rented for their services. So going back to that same building, I was like, whoa, whatever early version of my belief system being like, it's a God thing. Like I was having the like, oh,
Really?
it's the same place. I don't know. That felt significant. It's not, obviously. But that was very much I don't know, evangelical church. So that was my first experience in an evangelical church. And as I said, that was like, here's where you get the friends, right? Because there's the guy that I liked, there's his cousin and his girlfriend and a couple other people and their girlfriends. So there's like this whole group of late teen, early 20s people that go to this church and now they're like hanging out at their apartment and, just hanging out and doing cool stuff. Except that's the whole game is the like trying to get you to, um, you know, pray the sinner's prayer or whatever. And so I remember I decided to do that. And I was definitely doing it because I was like, oh, good, that'll get me in the club. And then maybe I can date that guy. So embarrassing. So I did that. And then he comes over like, oh, it's so exciting. And, I'm thinking he's liking me. And he was just excited that I had, prayed the sinner's prayer. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, I think that guy was definitely closeted too. So, like, there's just so much shit going on with that whole situation. But yeah, it was absolutely
Wow.
a love bombing thing. And I was in an extremely lonely, vulnerable place where I thought I needed
Hmm.
a man to be acceptable in the world or that would prove that
Yep.
I was okay, right? So that's driving every decision I'm making at that age. Um, I I had enough God indoctrination that I thought I needed something of God, and clearly the cult had been bad, so maybe this is fine because I hadn't figured out you could just not do that yet. So yeah, there was a lot of garbage going into that made me just need friends and need someone around me to make me feel like I was okay. And those
Yeah.
evangelical friends did that. They did that physically, like in the physical world, those were the friends. And they're telling me then I've got it right in the spiritual too.
All that validation. It's very interesting, Pats, that you and I were both sucked in at very vulnerable points in our life. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. It's
But
like they
isn't
have a
that
radar.
yeah, I mean, if you're not feeling vulnerable, I just don't think you're gonna fall into one of those.
Hmm.
It's like if you,
Because you
it's
don't
like you're,
need it. If you believe in yourself, if you trust yourself and you have the confidence, you don't need validation for anything. Those people aren't going to get you. I don't think they're going to get you.
Well, right. And if you have family and friends around you that actually
Mhm.
really like you and they enjoy your company just like you
And
enjoy their company, then all of
mhm.
a sudden you don't have a situation where you're just so starved for attention that you'll even take this fake attention that's just with the intent of getting you to give your life to Christ so that that person can add a notch on their rosary beads or cross or whatever the fuck.
Mm. And a lot of it just comes down to support. We just needed that support system.
So by senior year of high school, our cult fell away from us, which caused upheaval in our family. Our dad's indoctrinating himself and separating himself from the family. Things aren't great with our parents at that point because of that. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out the world and get myself off to college so I can get the fuck out of here and figure out my own life away from them. All of that's happening. So I go to college. I would say the first year I did nothing religious at college. I kind of just lived life, you know?
Hmm.
And then somewhere near that end of the first year or into the second year, well, I'm going to back up. So even though I was kind of just doing the college life, I still had a boyfriend back home that was at that evangelical church from my senior year. And so I maintained a little bit of connection to that. And so I wasn't like looking to let go of my faith at that point. So it just kind of lingered on, which made me totally primed for when a really clever advertising campaign for Campus Crusade for Christ happened at my college. Now, what
That
was it?
sounds absolutely terrifying.
Hmm.
Campus Crusades for Christ. Oh my God.
I know nothing like referencing like huge genocidal activities in the world, like the Crusades, like religious genocide, as a way to promote your modern group. Like, way to go, guys!
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Bring it to
uh-huh.
the modern world. Yes.
Mm. The Crusades again. Yeah. So yeah, so they kind of like kept the fires fueled or whatever, as far as like me just maintaining some notion of this is what should be happening in the world, especially when this group on campus like had to use the largest lecture hall we had to do their meetings.
Hmm.
So pretty, it looked pretty popular. It looked pretty cool, right?
And you were always the cool kid. You had to stay in the
I
cool club.
I was not ever the cool kid. What are you talking about? I was the
Okay,
nerd.
maybe I'm just the
I was
nerdy little sister who
dorky.
always thought you were cool.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that. But you should know I was not one of the cool kids at school. Um, but so actually, as it turned out, though, it wasn't Campus Crusade for Christ that eventually pulled me in because they were very much like whatever you would say about an evangelical church, that was what they were. Because I'd been raised so extreme, I'll just say I think that influenced that instead of getting involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, which was like, still gross and toxic as fuck, but like kind of
Hmm.
vanilla evangelicalism, along comes Chi Alpha, which is the college ministries of Assemblies of God, which is more of like the charismatic side of the evangelical world. So it's all the same. Well, I don't know. See, it's like such a broad range of how far evangelical churches go if they're just like kind of non-denominational and they're like bland Lutheran, or if they're, like doing glory dust from the sky and like quacking like ducks, like Stacy of Stacy's Mom podcast told us
Shout
about
out.
at their evangelical church. Right. So yeah, so this Chi Alpha group met, which was great. And of course there was another boy, the
It's
leader of
all,
it,
it
the
always
leader
comes
of
down
it.
to penis. That's how all problems seem to originate. Penis.
I did not think of it that way. I did not think that's what I was going for. What I thought I was going for was safety, because I was taught in so many ways that that is how a woman finds her value and her safety is by having a man. So I was all systems go on get that man, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what you were taught.
Yeah. So of course, I'm interested in this guy who's running it because he's showing me attention because I'm pretty and blonde. Let's just be completely real about what was going on there. That's what I believe was going on. And
Oh,
so
Patty, I'm sure your looks had nothing to do with it. I'm sure it was just your intellect that he was interested in and your clever wit.
apparently I didn't look like a pastor's wife enough, so that's fine.
You're breaking up with me? I thought you were proposing.
Proposing? Oh, if I'm gonna be a senator, well, I need to marry a Jackie, not a Marilyn.
That whole group was part of my undoing, like way farther back, because that was the group that like we had a retreat at one point in my time during college, and that was where like three of the women, after a time of prayer, all felt that the leader was supposed to be with them and they were supposed to marry him. And
I
so,
remember that
that's
story.
like
That's gross.
crack, crack, crack. Like, what is happening here? Kind of seems like there's, not a God that people are listening to. It kind of just seems like they just have things that they want and then they over emotionalize and spiritualize it. Huh.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that all these women thought that God meant for them to be with the same man?
Maybe God's a
Makes
polygamist. I mean,
you pull anything in regards to Christianity, they can spin it. They can spin it. But
so we figured out how I got sucked in college, but then I got sucked in again. I would say this is for the last time that I got sucked into evangelicalism. Well, last so far. Let's
what
see.
else did you get sucked during college, Pets?
Nothing. That's,
What did you suck during college?
oh, actually, is that true? No, I had kind of the, oh God, I kind of had the evangelical thing going. Like you hear the story. I did not do anal sex, but I have heard of some like evangelical girls deciding it was fine to have anal sex because that's apparently not the hole that God cared about.
Well, that's the
Um,
poop hole loophole. That's how
well,
they get away
yeah,
with it.
yeah. There's a song by Garfunkel and Oates about it that's pretty great.
Oh, you've
Jesus's
mentioned that one
loophole.
before. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, to be
Fuck
clear,
me
I
in the
did not do that. Fuck me in the ass because I love
because I love
Jesus.
Jesus.
Oh my God. Okay. I did not do that. However, there was other sexual acts that I didn't seem to mind at the time that I justified to myself. So that's true.
Yes.
That's true.
Sorry, this
And
is not a sex episode. Somehow we got there. But
I,
sorry, continue. Otherwise, we'll
I
go off on a
mean,
tangent, right?
we started this whole podcast because we had conversations that always ended in the cult. So if we start talking about the cult all the time with conversations that end in sex, I guess we know what our next channel is. Anyway,
Oh shit.
anyway,
Oh, okay.
so you would think I might have finished college and had a chance at freedom and not do the whole thing of evangelicalism after that. However, of course, I moved to a city where some people I had known in my church in college, because I did get sucked into the Assemblies of God church then too. Um, some friends from there had moved to this bigger city that I then moved to. And so I had a built-in place to go to church because I knew them already and they had friends that I could then know too. So, I mean, I'm seeing this recurring theme as I'm telling this story of like friend, boyfriend kind of thing. Like what I needed that let me be vulnerable to being sucked into an evangelical clusterfuck was my lack of connection to people who cared about me. You know?
Same. I'm gonna say the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I started going to this church, um, found that it worked for me. They were Assemblies of God, but they distinctly did not do the weirder shit of like speaking in tongues and then somebody else has an interpretation. They didn't do the stuff where they're falling on the floor and all of that. Like, there was a little bit of tongues, like if you were close together with someone and praying, There would be some talk of being like drunk in the Holy Spirit, which I did feel one time, but like I can reproduce it now if I work at it.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it it was probably my least extreme church experience, and yet all
Mm.
those hallmarks um of how they brought me in, how they kept me there, how they extracted my service, how they extracted my work, and expected that of me and expected me not to want anything for it in return except for, oh God, what is it? When you send in tithes, I was trying to legit do the right thing and do what God commanded with tithing, right? So, but what you get back when it's tax time is you get back this piece of
Mhm.
paper that says that you donated X amount in exchange for intangible spiritual benefits, which means
Gross.
in exchange for nothing.
Yeah.
So that was uh that was my experience of being brought into that church. They were very nice. They were very Minnesota nice.
Hmm. Yeah, just
Where
to clear that up, yeah, you were living in Minneapolis at the time. It didn't
correct.
take long for me to follow as well. So,
Right. So I mean,
years
I was
down.
very involved at this church. I was on the stage decorating team. So like all the light gels, and if we had a play or a special event, we would do like special
Hmm.
props that we would
Yeah,
build to put in
I
there. And
remember.
I'm not mad at that. I enjoyed what I got to learn and the cool things I got to build. Um, but you kind of see how hours, days, they could come and bring you in to work on those things. And like at some point I was like, why am I one of the only few people that's really like contributing? Like doing everything I can to make this project go,
Hmm.
you know? Like
Yeah.
with my money, with my time, with my energy, with my talent.
Well, a lot of Christians, that's how it goes. You want to tell someone that they'll pray for them, but they don't want to sit there in the hospital bed with them and hold them their hand and talk to them. That requires time and effort and kind of fucks with their emotions a little bit, things they don't want to deal with. That's just kind of the Christian way. Like just pray it away. It's a
Well,
cop out.
but I mean, I think that I gave all of my time and effort to making our services great because I really cared. And I'm thinking, well, gosh, if everyone's putting in this effort, look at what we could build together. And I still believe that. Like, I believe that about us. If we all really care and have a shared goal and shared purpose, we can do amazing fucking shit together. And so
Hmm.
that's what I thought I was a part of. And then I
Hmm.
realized, oh, like they talked about this lukewarm Christianity thing. And like at this point, I don't care about faith, but I'm looking around and being like lukewarm. Like all you people that come in your, designer clothing and you shake everyone's hand and smile sweetly and then go back to your McMansion. No, that's what lukewarm is. That's what
Hmm.
lukewarm is. And it does none of that requires faith.
It's interesting, Pat. We both found ourselves in a similar situation where we got involved with an organization thinking we were going to help people, and really it was a sham. It was the opposite, kind of how I got involved in the National Guard as well, thinking I was going to help people, thinking things like helping people during Hurricane Katrina was what I'd be doing instead of going overseas to fight a war.
I know you mentioned Amway and you'll get into that story, but like I
Hmm.
remember when you were listening to the indoctrination CDs for Amway, I remember them saying you can have all this money so that you can help other people. And literally the next line was, and we just closed on our new 6,000 square foot house. Like, what? Those moments
Hmm.
stuck with me.
That's something they bragged about a lot in Amway. Again, I don't want to jump too far ahead in this story, but Yeah, they just bragged about, oh, you can make so much money that you can have all those luxurious things and take trips and buy diamonds for your wife and all this. While also you can just give money to charity because you'll just have that much money. Yeah. It was the whole thing was horrible. I mean, we'll start getting into the details of that, but you were in Minneapolis at this church. I remember you even got married there.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And then what was it that made you start to crumble? Because it sounds like you were pretty, I don't know if you necessarily had a faith. You believed in people, though. I think you were still very much a humanist. You wanted to
I
help
know.
people.
That's a great point, Nancy. I think, yeah, if you look back at what I thought I was trying to achieve through every
Hmm.
form of belief I held, it was humanist ideas. It
Hmm.
absolutely was. That is, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I actually feel completely validated by that. It's gonna make me cry a little bit.
Yay!
That's great.
Validation. Yeah.
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 Well, but you asked what the thing was that made it all go away for me. And there's a few things. A few things that put a couple big cracks and then something that made it all crumble. And,
How big of crack?
if you are someone who is one of our loyal followers, which by the way, go ahead and like this episode and subscribe to the channel if you're not.
Good
Um,
segue.
so so I guess the way I got out, the things that made the cracks was I wanted to be the best evangelical I could because
You.
I was all in. Like as we said, like I actually saw that this could be a way for humans to do right for each other. I don't know if I really believed in like end times and antichrist and all of
Mhm.
Revelation shit at all, but I did think like hey, if we all have something to rally around like this, like maybe and we all like have these ideas about being good to each other, that could work, you know? So I do think that's what made me see how far I could take my faith, right? Like I wanted to take my faith to an extreme level where I knew that I knew that I knew that it was real, right? So I did two things. I audited a class at our local Assemblies of God Bible College. It was taught by a Jesuit priest, I'm pretty sure, missionary of some kind. But
Hmm.
he was linked in with this Assemblies of God church. And he was talking about the contradictions in the Bible. So, first of all, I was a cult church kid my whole life.
Hmm.
There are no contradictions, right?
Right.
And so
There's
for
thousands of them.
right. So for him to just say that flat out in a Bible college, I was like, what? Like that right away had my attention. But then he goes on to say, but because we're Christians, we believe that. And literally that was like bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Like my meters were going off at that point because we had been
Oh,
raised to seek truth. And so
yeah.
because we are this, we believe was like, what the fuck are you even talking about? And this is the thing I've heard where, like, when pastors are becoming pastors, they're too far down the road in their schooling by the time they're told the truth about all that stuff, where it's like really shown to them how fucked up our information about the Bible is and how none of it actually comports with each other. But they're stuck at that point, right? I think our friend Durante Lamar did a video about that, of like the lies that your pastor tells you because of what they got taught in that last semester or whatever of Bible college, where they got to
Yes.
know the stuff you don't talk about, right? So it was a little bit like just a tiny window into that, while auditing one single class was like, what? And so big crack, right? So I also still wasn't ready to be done. Still clearly, this is Patty the humanist. I decided to go on a missions trip because if we can go help people in another country, that sounds awesome, right? And this morning, you and I interviewed our friend AJ, Ways to Human, and she's from Argentina. That's where I went. I went to Argentina with my Assemblies of God church. So I'm thinking, I don't know, we're going to go do all kinds of things, minister to street kids, blah, blah. Sounds great. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, we get there and we go to a college. It's like a Assemblies of God college down there in Buenos Aires, which is fine. We're on the campus. That's where we're staying. We're doing some work on the campus, like yard landscaping projects. I was knocking down walls in a bathroom for the college students there in that Assemblies of God college.
Hmm.
So that so far that all sounds like stuff that's just to help ourselves, not the unsaved, right?
Correct.
Right. So, and we go out to dinner. We had steak and papas fritas, and flan. I mean, truly, like we went to the best stuff that maybe not the fancy, but like the most authentic, local, amazing food that Buenos Aires had to offer. Fantastic. I'm excited about that, right? I'm an American. And I've never left the country. That was my first leaving the country. So then the time comes when we are going to do some street ministry. So they're talking to us about the kids that live on the street there in their area. We go and we invite all the kids into this building where these street kids, and we're talking teenagers, not necessarily little kids, but so these teenagers are in there hanging out with us. We force them to listen to a sermon by the missionary that's down there. And then when they've patiently sat through that, they give them food, which was basically Uncrustables and Cheez-Its. And I could not handle seeing how they were treated and talked about and then given crap food while we came down to just work in making their building better, the school's building
Hmm.
better, and taken out for steak.
Okay, so yeah, it's basically just a church-funded vacation for its
Yeah.
members. Yes,
Don't you think that's what so many of these mission trips are? They're a
absolutely.
church funded vacation
Hmm. They get people
that
to
you can,
donate for this type of shit. We're doing something, we're changing lives around the world through missionary work. We're going to donate to this.
except they're not. They're like going to Europe and having a great time and then going in some
Hmm.
public square and doing an interpretive dance about their God or something. Like, yeah, okay, great. I mean, and it does nothing for the things I actually gave a shit about, which was making
Hmm.
life better for more people.
Can I just point out how gross I think the word unsaved is? It's right along the lines of like uncircumcised instead of saying intact. Yeah, like there's something wrong with you. You are the un you're lacking something.
Lacking something that like isn't a thing you need.
Right.
Yeah, but they make you
It's
think you
gross.
need something and then try to sell it to you. Oh, like
Marketing.
so those
Exactly.
experiences definitely left the shell of my faith still there, but with a lot of cracks running through it. And then skip forward another couple of years, still been going to church
Yeah, sorry, can you clarify what year that was you went to Argentina?
in 2005, I'm pretty sure.
Oh shit. Okay. And then you say a couple more years after that, you slowly start to get away from all that. And that's about the time I was getting in.
So the cracks are happening in 2005-ish, 2005, 6. And then come 2008 or so, I'm getting like we've been saving, and I'm talking about having a baby. Like this is a big time coming up for my husband and I, right? Like this matters. I've spent my whole life not just searching for a man because I was told to, but also feeling like it was the thing I would grow up to do would be to have kids. Like I was
Hmm.
supposed to, but I also didn't mind that as the thing that I was told to do. Yeah.
Hmm. And can I ask about your family dynamic as far as like your in-laws go and your husband's family? Because I know that became strained at least later on, but how were things like say between you and your mother-in-law during the time period when you were quote unquote a good little Christian girl and you were doing missionary work and ever so faithfully going to church and being involved in ministry and all that? Like, how was your relationship with her during that time period?
Early on, when I was fully an evangelical and professing all of that, as long as I did what my mother-in-law wanted me to do, I was definitely in the club, like I don't know for sure that I got golden childed in that situation, but a little bit. Like I was kind of for a while the one that could do no wrong, and yet there was so much coercion going on in how I was to behave or be there to like look however I looked because I would get introduced as this is our Patty. Like, no, no, you don't own me. Right? So, but like the parallel story of my own deconstruction here of these cracks happening, I don't know exactly what point it started for my husband, but at some point he also started questioning and listening to Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And so for him, he was starting to see the parallels of the Christian story with other stories from history and starting to like recognize, oh, it's a story, you know? And so I'm carrying all these cracks. And then as he's just barely starting to deconstruct some of that stuff too, I'm having all these cracks and we're talking about babies and I'm picturing my life with baby, with kids. And I thought about church and putting them in the nursery where I had, of course, volunteered because I was going to be a mother someday. Um, and it fell apart. All the broken pieces came off because I was like, I can't put my kid in there and lie to them like that. And then I was like,
Hmm.
oh, because I'd be lying to them. Because I admitted to myself via thinking about my someday future children that it was all bullshit.
Holy shit. So you finally admitted it to yourself that you didn't
Yes,
believe this
I
crap.
think I didn't believe it for a long time, like didn't believe it, but I had to believe it to be safe, so I didn't even let myself realize I didn't believe it. Seriously.
Mm. Well, and here you were trying to be an impressive daughter-in-law to your new family that you married into. And I mean, your husband was
Well,
just as indoctrinated into like the evangelical space as you were into a fundamentalist doomsday cult. I mean, you both were on, a similar spectrum in different areas because he had a
I
lot to
would
deconstruct as well.
Well, right. And I would say in some ways he maybe even had it worse because, our cult we talk about was just flat out about how awful God was in the Bible. So that's pretty
Right.
easy to be like, well, if that's not real, I don't want it then. But, when you're indoctrinated into fluffy Jesus and you're passive
Hmm.
aggressively put into a fight or flight mode around your eternity, because of that upbringing, it's a little different. And he was homeschooled in small Baptist schools and church and like never in the real world. So, I mean, if you can't actually see the real world in which you live, I mean, great job for indoctrinating a kid, but terrible if you want them to function in the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it took him a lot of work to get himself through that and out of it, you know?
Right.
Um, I mean,
I
thankfully he's a man, so that makes it a little easier to move through the world and the indoctrination about being um being less than and under the subservience of someone isn't as strong as it is for girls in that situation.
in a weird way, I almost feel like your husband was more manipulated by his situation for sure. It just, like, it was there with our parents, but it was weird. They just kind of left everything up to the church. It's not like they sat us down when we were growing up and we'd read Bible passages and whatever. We never did that. They read
No,
their Bible. We didn't do any of that. We were just told what to do and what not to do.
right.
But I feel like the manipulation was so much stronger in many ways with your husband and his family.
Well, in evangelicalism, it relies on the people policing each other, right? It
Right.
turns them
Hmm.
on each other and makes them point each other's faults out, but not faults, just like straying from the religious party line.
Hmm.
And I mean, to be totally honest, he was part of what I would say is a narcissistic family cult.
Absolutely. I agree.
Right? I
I
mean,
saw it.
so
Hmm.
when we talk about groups of high control, I do not think we are just talking about something that's actually classified as a cult because when we did the episodes around the wheel of power and control and how high control groups like do control all the aspects of your life, they actually develop that off of a domestic abuse model. And
Right.
so it absolutely applies to a narcissistic partner or parent, which then controls several arms of a whole narcissistic family cult.
Mm-hmm.
Like this shit is real. And this is how people control each other and call it love. And they can do things that just needle at you and break you down without saying anything that just written in text other people would see as bad.
Right. Very well put, Pats. That's exactly.
And that's the
Exactly.
beauty of coercion.
Beauty, huh?
Yeah, it's beautiful for the people that want to control others. It's a marvelous fucking tool.
Oh, it's good for them. Absolutely. It's good for them.
Hmm.
Damn.
Well, right, but let's be real about where a narcissist drive to control others is from. It's that they don't have control of themselves. They don't feel good enough about themselves, and they've learned that if they force people to behave these ways around them, it
Hmm.
soothes enough of the spots, but it's completely destructive to the people that they extract that energy from.
Right. And I guess I wasn't around. I mean, I was there in Minneapolis living, just kind of doing my own thing. But for a while, I guess I just didn't really understand that you were moving away from your churchiness and your involvement in evangelicalism because, well, first of all, I didn't really understand it. This was something that was just not an interest of mine. I went back and read the entire Bible, but from a historical perspective, like I wanted to learn more or less what was in there. But again, I was just looking for those little bits of like actual history from it.
I eventually got there, but for me, it really was about seeing the manipulation, the saccharine sweet control that my mother-in-law had over the whole family unit and used the
Big time.
power, well, and used the like the power of the church to back up what she was doing and saying, right? So it's like I saw, like I could see the manipulation on a one person level, and that helped me see the manipulation of the whole religious system and even religious belief
Mhm.
as a whole, just in you have to forego rational thought. Um, but then at the same time, being a part of that Assemblies of God church once I was an adult and out of college, I think that experience, I was looking at what they were doing, how they were saying things, and it looked so much like running a company, running a business, a
Hmm.
corporation, that I was like, and that like undid so much more of the like institutional side of things. So like the
Yeah.
emotional side, the institutional side, all those pieces just started coming apart and
Yeah.
made me realize how those high control situations harmed people. And honestly, I wouldn't even say that was my last high control environment, Nancy. Like it's not really worth talking about, but I briefly got involved in a local like natural foods group where they went all the way on fermenting and soaking and like traditional foods group. That's what it is, more like a traditional foods. And after a little while, like I thought it was interesting and fun, and I liked the science side, whether that was pseudoscience or not, I'm not sure. But then I get to a point with that thing where I was like, why does this feel like a cult too? It was like it was
It's like
like
everywhere.
well, it's like as soon as there's things you have to do in a certain way to be acceptable to the group, and you're there, and like all of a sudden
Yes.
I'm feeling the culty feelings. So when
Hmm.
that group is like, oh, I would never give my child pasteurized milk. Like, okay, yeah, come at me if you want to about raw milk. Like, I wouldn't do it now. That's just where I was at, okay? But like when you start policing people in your group back into this box, we've got a problem. Same thing when I was part of climate action stuff. Like, there was a
Hmm.
weird little sense. This is probably the least of it, but here's how these little feelings linger, right? Like there was just this little sense in that climate group that if you drove up without a hybrid or electric car, if you're still driving a full gas guzzler, like, what are you doing? You know?
I think that's funny when you went through your crunchy mom sort of hippie hipster period because you were all about it too. Like you got on my case as well. I don't think we really had the closeness that we do now. That took a number of years for us to get to this place where we felt like we were close friends. I think just because you were going through much shit and so was I when we were living in Minneapolis. But it was during that time period that I remember the food stuff, and I was living with you for a short time. And I remember bringing home like a box of like, I was craving like puffin cereal, right? I'm like, oh, this cute little puffin on the front. And you chewed my ass out. You like,
Oh my
get that
God.
crap out of my house right now. I think you told me the same thing with either like, something soy, like maybe I had like roasted soybeans, and you're like, they're GMO, you get them out of my house right now. Or like, you are such a bitch on this shit. I was like, what is going on with you? Like you were all about the food and everything had to be a specific way. And I was trying to keep up
Well,
with it.
but I know it's terrible and I am sorry. I'm
Oh,
so sorry.
you have nothing to apologize, Pats. I just talking about it makes me realize like, oh yeah, that did happen. That was that little stint of like your crazy food situation. Like I saw it.
But think about why. We were raised
Hmm.
in a cult that monitored our food and there was certain foods we couldn't eat, right? Like very strict rules, the Old
Hmm.
Testament clean and unclean meat shit. Like
I mean,
no
it's no
wonder, but
wonder.
no wonder I was looking for a system that wasn't religious because that was the point I had come out of church. I was
Yeah.
looking for a system that wasn't religious, but like somehow controlling my food felt safe to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fucked up shit right there.
There was always going to be elements in our life that we pulled like from the culty situation into the real world. And I guess natural food was it for you for a while. You know, and I kind of got into the same thing. Like you had said before, like our mom pretty much was raised us with healthy, made from scratch meals. And she steered away from like sugary cereals. That was a big thing, and maybe that's why the puffin cereal Kate thing came up. Um, and you mentioned that, you know, you're not necessarily against that, but then when you start getting crazy and kind of making it almost cult-like, then yeah, it becomes a problem. Like there is no balance in life. These people, it becomes so extreme. It's almost like you're moving from one addiction to another. And I feel like
Yes.
Jesus and church can all be an addiction as well.
Yes. I would love to know more about the brain. We should talk to AJ from Ways to Human about that and see if
Yes.
there's like studies about the brain on that, because holy shit, exactly. Yeah, so that took a while for me to get through all of mine, but like your story, Nancy, like kind of starts into evangelicalism as mine is ramping down.
Right? And I find that very strange. Like it's weird that both of us were not into evangelicalism at the same time. It was one right after the next. So if I were to just skim over, like from the time our parents moved away and you went to college and started your sort of morph into evangelicalism, I was just bopping around in life. I was still in Wisconsin, just kind of working dead end job to dead end job, you know, barely making ends meet, drinking and partying a lot. Um, a lot. This is my early 20s. And so I don't think I made it up to Minneapolis where you were until what? Maybe I was 22-ish?
It was when I was in my house and I moved in
Yes.
there at 23. I loved that little tiny house. I couldn't really
Yeah.
afford it when I started, but I loved that house.
I can't
Um,
believe you bought your first house when you were 23. You're a badass, Pats.
I know, but it's when they were giving away mortgages to people who shouldn't have had mortgages.
Yeah, the reason I think that I was 22 is because I joined the military at 23. So I'll always remember the date. So when our parents moved away in 99, I lived with like a random family of a friend because you fought to keep me in Wisconsin so that I could graduate high school. I only had a few months left, and why the fuck would our parents move away across the country when one of their children is just about to finish high school? That's pretty fucked. But luckily, uh, you fought to keep me here. You were in college, and just to gloss over this a bit, I had just a shit time for quite a few years. I lived in more places that I can count, doing all my partying and drinking and just trying to feel numb. I was just trying to make ends meet. Again, here I am just swept up in a world that I was not familiar with. I didn't know anything outside of our family dynamics, which obviously was not good. Um, I really didn't have any friends in high school nor in my childhood. And so it's like, how do I talk to people? How do I build a community? How do I feel safe? Well, I didn't feel safe. That's why I drank as much as I did. That's why I dabbled in drugs. That's why I was very promiscuous too. I was just trying to find a little slice of happiness out there in the world. At the same time, there was a part of me that actually loved it because I'm like, finally, I don't have anyone that has any expectations of me. I'm free to just be me and do whatever I wanted. So I managed to eventually get my own apartment and start piecing my life together, have a stable job, maybe put away a little bit of money, and then I started looking into college. Well, of course, I went from one bad relationship to the next during this time period, and you knew that. You actually came in the middle of the night once, and you're like, I'm getting you out of this situation. And so from there, it wasn't specifically that one, but you had been in Minneapolis for, I can't believe it was only a year or so. Um, well, like just a year or two. And you brought me up to Minneapolis to start a new life up there because there was really nothing for me back in Wisconsin. I had lived in Fond du Lac at the time, but like I said, there were so many places I lived. Um, but I didn't have any like drive for the future. I was just taking it a day at a time, right? Because again, I was just trying to feel something. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I mean, to be honest, I think I was just really scared. And yeah, drinking helped with that. So after a long string of just partying and bad decisions, yeah, you brought me up to Minneapolis and I stayed with you for a little while, living there. And then I think at that point, I did eventually find a place of my own. I started taking some college courses and I started my career in, I guess, hospitality management. I was going for my degree in business management with a focus in hospitality. So, like, I started working for hotels. Hilton was the one I went with initially, and then worked my way up to be a manager. And then I got into human resources and continued my education at that point. But all while this is going on, I ended up joining the military. A friend of ours, actually, our mutual friend who went to your church, Pat, in fact, you introduced me to her, a lovely woman from Jamaica. She had a daughter who was about to join the National Guard. And she was telling me about it, and I thought, oh, this is cool. I could do this. That was my godless granny moment. It was like, I could do this. And so it didn't take long for, of course, a recruiter to show up at my door. And then I'm like, okay, well, I can get physically fit. I can travel the world, all the glamorous bits that they tell you about the military. But I think I had that same moment like you did, Pets, where I thought maybe I'd be helping people. Um, because I thought, well, National Guard, they're more stateside. They go around and help with like natural disasters, like what they would go on to do with Hurricane Katrina and shit. So I thought, well, let's give it a try. So I thought this is a perfect scenario. I could be in the military, get all the training, get my education paid for, and just the experience in general, all while I could also have a civilian career. And so that's what I did for quite a few years. Joined the military, did my duties there, also while having roles in management in hotels, as well as trying to navigate college courses and all that. So did that for a number of years. Now come, mid 2000s. I'm not exactly sure when that was, but I also want to say that was around 2005, around the time when you were getting away from evangelicalism. I was approached by an old friend of mine from the first college I attended, which she wasn't even really a friend. She was more of an acquaintance, and I found it so strange. She just kind of reached out to me randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, I thought that was strange, but I thought, oh, that's cool. At this point, I worked my ass off so much that I just really didn't have a social life. You know, I wouldn't, it's crazy to think the majority of my life, I really didn't have like close friends. I just took care of me. I just did my own thing. I've been in my own headspace a long time, long time. Um, and so I thought it was kind of cool. I'm like, okay, well, we can hang out. Um, and so we meet at a coffee shop. I was like, okay, this is cool. But there was another person with her. Hmm. Why is there another person with her? And why is he carrying a laptop and a notebook and pamphlets of something? What the hell's going on? My
Why
guards
does
were up.
that feel a little bit like a woman have like saying, "Oh yeah, meet me for coffee, friend," and then like her pimp is there?
Oh my God.
I'm
I don't think you're that
sorry.
far off. No, I don't think you're exaggerating, Pat. It almost feels like being pimped out,
That's
like
always the game.
targeted.
I got a call one time from someone I had given a talk during my crunchy time against GMOs, and it was at a church or whatever. And somebody I knew through that whole realm calls me up and was like, "Oh, you want to make money?" La, 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 la." And I was like,
Oh
I guess I'll hear
shit.
what you have to say." But I was also like
Yes.
not in a place where I could say no yet, right? Like I wasn't good at saying no. And then they are like going to bring some other person on the line. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And at that point, I knew enough about MLMs that I was like, "No, let me stop you right there." So
Hmm.
like I was gonna let him, but then I was like, actually, and this is me shaking, like I'm telling him, like, actually, no, I don't want to talk to that person. If you keep doing this, you're gonna lose all your friends. And then I hung up, like that was as far as I could get to once I realized the little like shitty trick he was about to play. But anyway, it's a little
That's
worse when
awesome,
you
Pass.
walk in
Yes.
and there's a person like literally sitting there. Ew.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it just makes for a really awkward situation. Now, there must have been something going on with the popularity of MLMs like mid 2000s. They were not on my radar yet. In fact, I really didn't know anything about them other than there were companies out there that I knew were direct marketing like Avon and Mary Kay, but I really didn't know much about them outside of that. I certainly had never even heard of Amway, which was surprising because that's exactly what it was. I would be introduced to it real quick. Now,
Except it wasn't called Amway.
no, it was called Quickstar. One of their little, what do you call them? Like it's a business within a business almost, like it's a separate section of like IBOs, independent business owners, and one of their ploys is to make people feel special, like this is your business. Yeah, you're going to be selling these products, but it's your business. You run it. And therefore it like takes it takes away some of like the having to go to your upline. They call it an upline where you like report to like the person in the business tree above you, right? So whenever you like as an independent business owner, you purchase products like for yourself and then you sell them and people can like get registered on your website. It's yours. You're a business owner. You've made the big time. Um, and then they can buy products and then you make a percentage of money. The people above you make a percentage of money. The people above them make a percentage of money. Everyone makes money. They have a whole spiel. All right. Now we can get more into in depth with MLMs in another whole episode,
Did we define
but I did.
MLMs?
MLM is multi-level marketing. So you're basically purchasing products directly from the manufacturer and you're not going through a third party. Like it's going directly from them to either yourself or whoever's buying these products. And so I had never even really heard of what a pyramid scheme was. I may have heard the term, but I hadn't really come to grips with like what that was or what all that entailed. But if ever there was an organization that was more like how evangelicalism works, it was multi-level marketing. And the king of that is Amway. And that's what it was. I was in Quickstar, a segment of this, what is now probably, I think it was like $6.5 billion corporation that has had countless lawsuits against them for being a scheme that they just pay off. It's really something. But yeah, getting back to my story, I went to this coffee shop and all of a sudden it wasn't like I was meeting with an old friend and hanging out and having a good time. It was I was being targeted for something. I was being duped. I was being pitched this idea. I was seen as a number for them because that's what it is. Um, they make it seem like it's this glamorous thing. You are going to make a fortune selling stuff. That also during that time period when evangelicalism was kind of at its height with purity culture and all those books were coming out, Kiss Dating Goodbye and all that. Well, there were a bunch of business books coming out as well, like Think and Grow Rich was one of them, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and The Five Love Languages. With Quickstar and this group of people, there were all these CDs and books. There's our booklets again. It was just all indoctrination, but on more of a business level. But evangelicalism was intertwined in this. And I bring this up because somehow, even though I felt uncomfortable in this situation and didn't want to join this scam, I didn't think it was a scam at the time necessarily. I just thought, well, if this girl reached out to me, maybe I can look into it. But again, I just didn't have the confidence at that time in my life to be able to say, I think this is crap. I don't want anything to do with this. I just kind of went along with it, having a place. And eventually, when I had 20, 30 people surrounding me all saying the same thing, that this is beneficial for me and using all the manipulative tactics that they use, I eventually joined it. And then all of a sudden, I had a team of people who supported me, love bombed me right and left, made me feel like I was important. And believe me, I am not that type of person that needs shit like that. In fact, I hate that. But that time in my life was the exact time in my life and when it was perfect for them to swoop in and just dupe me. So I went along with it for quite a few years. And I remember this went on through at least to like 2009, 2010, because I deployed to Iraq in 0809, and I was still selling this shit when I was over there. And let me tell you, I'm the worst salesperson out there. Don't hire me to sell shit because I feel like I, I I try not to sell things to people because I feel like I'm manipulating them. And that's exactly what it is. I don't know how I eventually got away from it, but I kept going to an evangelical church, like a mega church, one where it's literally fucking televised and you have this crusty old dude up front, white, of course, and he's also selling a bunch of videos and booklets, and half the sermon is about the more money you give in tithes, the more you will be blessed. And everyone in there lives in a nice place and like a gated community and talking in tongues bullshit. Again, I've felt uncomfortable there every day I went, and I tried to avoid going. I hated it. But I eventually became roommates with this girl who introduced me to the MLM and to this evangelical church. So it was like, how do I escape from this? I thought it many times. I'm like, how do I get away from this? This is ridiculous. I've said it before. I've never set foot in a church because I actually wanted to be there. I either felt coerced or I feel like I just don't want to deal with people getting on my case about not going. They're going to make me feel bad, and I just don't need that in my life right now.
So I was out enough of the church and I
Hmm.
had identified the MLMs. Like there were so many come to my fucking party things going on in my
Yep.
evangelical church where you like basically just feel like you have to spend $50 that you don't have at least, you know?
Yeah, it's horrible.
So like I had connected those things for sure, right? And I had felt the yuck of I really hate the obligatory nature of these fucking MLM parties. And so then when you called me and you were like, Patty, have you ever heard of Quick Star? And I was like, no, but then you were describing it and I was like, shit, that's one of those companies. So
Oh
I'm trying to talk
shit.
you out of it, but you were already like, I need to make money, I'm in. Um, and so and so you were doing that and I couldn't stop it. And then I remember listening to your cringy like indoctrination tapes and stuff. It was at the point that I already had a baby. So I was at home with my baby and you were wanting to do this thing so much. And you were like, oh, I'll give you a gift. And you brought like catalogs over for me to look at. And um, you intended to like have me pick something that you were going to buy us as a gift.
Yeah.
But I immediately was like triggered by your MLM-ness, and I thought you were bringing those over to like get me to buy shit from you, and I was mad and I was mean. So,
I probably deserved it. Yeah, I fell into that crap. And I think I may have gotten like into it for a little bit because I was trying to impress like the people on my team. They would meet regularly outside of church to like go over like sales and everything, and they made you feel bad if you weren't selling enough. So I was trying to like impress my new friends.
so were you at all in a church that wasn't because of being part of this multi-level marketing group?
No, never.
Fascinating. I don't think I realized it totally was connected and never stood alone.
Right. No, it
Fascinating.
was definitely standalone. No, I hated church. I didn't want anything to do with it. My whole life, I never wanted anything to do with it. So
Right.
it was like evangelicalism came with the package of the MLM. Even though I didn't want anything to do with that either, somehow I still got sucked in and then had a roommate and yeah, yeah, it was awful. It was a lot of bullshit. But needless to say, let's see. I was in the army till 2015, but I think it was not long after I had deployed and returned. You were pregnant with your first child, and things started to take a shift from there.
Well, if I recall correctly, you had left that roommate in charge of your bank accounts or something
Hmm.
during that time to manage things for you while you were deployed, something like that.
Yeah,
And she completely took advantage of it because she was under such pressure to make her sales quota or whatever for Amway.
exactly. Yes, she was going to help me, like because I was overseas and not really speaking to mom and dad. I'm like, well, what should I do here? Like, of course, the whole team made me think I could trust them. And my roommate was she was collecting my mail, which she fucked everything up. I had so many bills that like went to collections, and she stole money from me to pay for just anything, gas for events. Yeah, it was a mess. And so I needed to get out of this situation because once I returned from Iraq, I realized, just how much money she had taken from me. And, she was crying, apologetic, and she doesn't know why she did that. Oh, I know why you did that. You were indoctrinated into this shit too, and you feel like you have to impress people and all. But I stopped being friends with her after that. Finally, I had the courage to like leave, and I don't know if I found another apartment, I guess, in Minneapolis. Like, I think that was the time when I moved right across the street from you.
So I think it was kind of the idea of like deconstruction at this point, right? Because I had all these things that happened that were like, oh, I think this is toxic. Oh, I think this is bullshit. But for you, you
Hmm.
kind of never really believed it and you just were kind of numb going through the motions of doing what you needed to do. But
Yeah.
then at some point, that friendship collapsed because she had treated you bad. And like, I don't know if you saw more about the organization or like the evangelical side of things. Like, what was it that actually like you were out after you got back from being overseas?
I think it was ultimately that she had stolen money from me and just my shit was in absolute disarray because she just didn't take care of things while I was gone, even though um she was supposed to. That's how we had arranged it. I would get my room back and become her roommate again once I got back from overseas and just shit was not I don't know. Everyone in the group seemed to behave differently towards me once I got back too. Um, Also, I went through sort of an interesting transformation when I was serving overseas because when I was about 2 months away from returning home, my R&R had come up. This is something that I do talk about in my novel a little bit. I touch on this that I took a 2-week trip to New Zealand. And I think I just all of a sudden had this drive to start traveling the world. Like that was starting to consume me. I'm just like, okay, the military is paying for me to fly somewhere because instead of flying back home to see our families, we had the option to go somewhere else too. I picked New Zealand. So I flew there by myself. It was my first international trip solo, and I had just such a great time, and I felt like I was finally free somehow. I was just like, I don't need to abide by all this crap. I'm not into this evangelicalism and MLM crap, and I'm really not into the military either. It was kind of a stopover. I never really had that much against the military. I mean, there was a lot I disagreed with there, but I also felt like that transformed me a little bit, and I had opportunities that a lot of people didn't, including the opportunity to travel. That may have been part of the reason that I joined the military. And so something shifted in me when I had taken a trip to New Zealand, those 2 weeks. And then I came home and then I returned home to the US and I was just sort of bored. Not only was I bored and seeking adventure at that point, I had known before I came home about this friend of mine stealing money from me, and then I had returned to this group at MLMs, and I'm just like, something's different. I can't do this anymore. Can't do it. I guess the community that I was looking for was never in any of that. It was within the atheist space because I finally figured out that that's exactly what I was. This is how I've always thought, and I finally found out that there were other people out there like me. And so, yeah, the rest was history.
I'm not even sure I would say you were an evangelical exactly. It's
No.
like you were in an MLM cult that had a side helping of evangelicalism.
Right, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, that I had never any faith involved in that.
So all of the things that evangelicalism is, like if you weren't in it to believe it and you were there as like a business adventure a little bit, like or an attempt at making money, like how did you see the way people interacted? Right? Like you mentioned the uplines in the MLM. Like so to me, I see that's like hierarchical-ish money-wise. But like, what about the church itself? Like, what did you notice about the people in the church or like how you were brought in or connected to the church that you feel like you could see because you weren't a believer?
It just felt so artificial to me. The whole talking in tongues thing I thought was really weird from the start. Like I had heard of talking in tongues before, didn't really understand it. But then you see people doing this, I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing? They even had something similar to what apostasy said when she talked about the whole like this room of people. They were laughing and quacking like ducks and running around and jumping, laughing. There was something similar in this church where people stayed hours past a service and they would just be like touching each other. Then all of a sudden they would burst into laughter and sometimes look like they're fainting and then lying on the floor for a while. And I'm just like, what the
What?
fuck is going on? So there was one instant where some dude just like he was laughing his ass off and he walks up and touches me on the shoulder as if I was supposed to do something. I was like, hi, awkwardly. And then he touches me again. I'm like, and I just kind of smile. I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, am I supposed to do something? Am I supposed to fake like I'm laughing right now? It was so fucking weird.
This is why
And
it works for people who were like raised in it because, or something like it's like they're just open to being like, oh yeah, that's the automatic response. But when you didn't get raised in it, you're like, what? Because I had the same thing with the whole like getting slain in the spirit. It was like this women's conference and they were supposed to like make you fall or whatever. And I like didn't fall and I was like, okay. So they pushed harder and then eventually I was like, I guess I'll just lay here, guys.
I feel like
So
you and I
weird.
went to some retreat at one point and we were like the only people in there sitting, not doing anything. Everyone else was like crying and hugging and just doing weird culty type shit.
It's like
And
emotional masturbation.
exactly. So this church also, I know they spent $1 million just to build like this insanely massive hallway around the church. This served absolutely no function. But there was one time everyone was lined up after services to get touched, and that was supposed to do something, like some special touch from God. You know, the pastor used to do that a lot too, touch. And then everyone would fall back. And I was like, are you kidding me? So they would have
Wait,
someone
but they
behind
get
you
all
to
up in
catch
their,
you.
oh my God. But then they get all freaked out about chakras. Like,
Well,
whoa,
right.
what the
But
fuck?
when it came to like this person coming close to me, I was just like, what the hell's going on? Everyone's like the woman next to me was like hysterical, Pats. She was crying, almost screaming. She's just like, oh, 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 I can't wait. Jesus is gonna touch me. And like just this Karen-y woman who literally thought all this was real. And as soon as they come to me,
Oh,
I did the same thing. Like they touch my head and like they're trying to push me back.
yeah, of
And I
course.
stood my ground. I'm standing up. And they're making it seem as if I'm resisting God's love or touch or grace or something like that. They're
Oh,
like, God's trying to give it to you. Just take it. Just take it. I'm like, okay, so you want me to fall back. That's all you're doing. The same thing happened with the
God's trying to give it to you, huh?
promises, 2,000 years of edging, pets. He hasn't come back yet. Okay. But anyway,
Come
yeah.
back and give it to me, Jesus.
But how fucking stupid is that? Like everyone's lying here like a bunch of weirdos. And if people are telling me that this isn't like a cult, oh my God. That's more cultish than the one we were in, Pats. That's like drink the Kool-Aid type of shit. All these
Oh,
weirdos
yeah.
thinking something is going on, like God, the Holy Spirit is moving through you. And when it came to talking in tongues, there were a bunch of people that talked in tongues too. But guess what? They also line you up, and the pastor comes over and puts his hands on you, and everyone starts talking in tongues. You know what he did? He just started going like this. Yeah, that's basically all it was, is he's saying gibberish and he's telling us bit by bit to repeat after him. So we're
What?
not talking in tongues. You are saying a bunch of weird crap and we are repeating it is all that's going on. See, talking about our evangelical experiences, now I'm remembering all kinds of crap that I had forgotten about and just how disgusting it was. And this person that I lived with, my roommate, she would always bring me to church and I was so defiant in church. Like I didn't want to do any of this crap and everyone has their hands up and eyes closed and it's just awkward and gross. And she would literally grab my hand because I had it down and pull it up in the
What?
air. And I told her to stop it, like stop doing that. Like, what is wrong with you?
Ew.
Like,
Wow,
I'm
talk
sorry, you
about
need
control. Friends is probably the biggest thing of how evangelical churches will loop you in and get
hmm
you stuck, right? Get you established with a community and everything. So you feel like you're walking away from everything, not just church. And so you
Right.
get stuck having to do the motions even if you don't believe the beliefs. But I think I got completely emotionally manipulated through music. And
Oh,
this connects a little bit to the interview that we did with AJ of Ways to Human today, um, talking about just how we think, right? That was her big question to us. And I recognize that I think in feelings and I have to kind of like translate that into words somehow. And so I feel like I was super wide open for that. You know, as a little kid, I loved belting out the hymns out of the hymnal and I would get complimented by adults on
hmm.
that. So that was a big deal. And so then I'm hearing like evangelical Christian music on the radio, and it's inviting and it's catchy and it pulls at my heartstrings. And then now I know what they actually do in evangelical churches when they have their music set at the beginning. They know what they're doing and they very intentionally will like take the music to a place where it emotionally crescendos only to drop you down into something really deep and heavy in your emotions. And they know that that's a great way to bring people, like to bring up their fears, their sadnesses, whatever their things they're grieving, and to like to poke at it and be like, we're here to help with that. When really they aren't. They're there to offer you Jesus for $3 a pound. Well, Nancy, I guess we have covered at least what is our first initial dive into each of our time in evangelicalism. And I was actually really interested to figure out that, oh, you were never really an evangelical outside of your multi-level marketing group. So that I
Right.
feel like
Hmm.
that's really interesting. I'm going to guess that there are people listening to us who have experienced a narcissistic family cult, have experienced multi level marketing, and definitely people who've experienced what it's like in the high control environment of evangelicalism. So if you're one of those people that has been listening to this and just feeling like, oh, that is what happened to me and that's how I feel, but I don't believe it anymore, I want you to know you can get out. You can get out and you can be free and you can live authentically where you are not controlled by purity culture, by the rules of the church, and any of that. We didn't get that much farther than just our stories and our time in evangelicalism, but so much came up for us here about sexuality and purity culture and just all the
I was gonna say.
myriad of topics that could potentially spin off of evangelicalism. So, we're really looking forward to diving into this a little bit deeper and to kind of seeing what we can do to unfuck the fuckery that's been foisted upon all of us by evangelicalism and now moving into fucking Christian nationalism. So it seems a little more important than it once did for us to be unfucking this stuff and helping people break free because these ideas are hurting us and it's coming back to bite us bigger than before. So now is our
Mm.
time to reject these dumbass ideas of a God, of Jesus, of religion that controls us. And instead, maybe we can work together to build a better world for all of us because we have enough on this planet if we work together. And I will not idly sit by and let a fucking stupid mythological idea drive us apart and cause more harm to people.
Here, here. Mhm. Yes, I
Feeling
know.
pissed now. All right.
Isn't
Well,
it weird, Pats, though, to think that evangelicalism is so far in the past for both of us, and yet here it is staring us in the face yet again on like an unprecedented level, like nationwide, like this could control us in ways that we might not be able to stop. It's very scary.
yeah,
So yeah, we definitely have to band together now. But I'm glad we're talking about this, Pats, because it's just as relevant.
it's so infuriating to think, phew, I've finally let go of that bullshit religion that's been hurting me. Well, here it comes around the fucking bend.
Well, people don't want to lose that control, Pats. They're going to do whatever they can to regain it, just like they've used the Bible to do so for thousands of years.
Ooh. So, well, we're not going to take it lying down. So, we are going to
Sometimes.
continue. Sometimes you just got to put a washcloth on your face. Um, but so we want to keep doing this. We want to keep being here on Apostate Sisters and talking about these things. We want our comments on our channel and our Discord to be spaces where people can come together and share what they've been through and heal the hurts. So if you want to keep this show going, like it, comment, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends. If you really want to keep the show going, we would love it so much if you would become a channel member or join us on Patreon. We will give you some perks for that, including some behind the scenes footage. So we want to keep doing this. As long as we can keep saying the things that need to be said, we're going to do that. And we'd like you to partner with us and join us on this journey as you free yourself and help free others. So thank you for being here for this, and we will catch you in the next one.
Like and subscribe. Hey.
Exactly.
Oh, this nauseous. Oh, this is not done.
Dialamo kotata na matakeshi ni lokobata shakitiamo kotala kapato shatitiamo kotolakte shatitiamo kotalata takeshi.